Now that you have all of your cloud backup for Azure AOS apps configured, and you've actually gone in to Cloud Backup for Azure, and you've determined the type of storage profile or profiles that you're going to need, you're ready to go in and create backup scopes to essentially tell the tool what you would like to protect. To do that, we log on to AOS and we click on Cloud Backup for Azure. In Cloud Backup for Azure on the Home tab, the 3 backup scopes that you can protect are Azure AD, VMs, and Azure Storage. Azure Storage could be either file shares or blob storage, or both. If I go into the first one, Azure Active Directory, and I click on the little gear, you can see I can come in here and I can create a new backup scope. Please note that each AD can only be included in one backup scope. So I'm going to click New Backup Scope, and the first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me about an app profile. Now this is the Azure Backup app profile that you would have created previously up in AOS, facilitating communication between the tool and your AD in your Microsoft 365 tenant. If you have multiple tenants, you may have multiple Azure Backup apps to choose from. With the app selected, you click Next. Here you have to fill in the additional information for that backup scope, which includes its name, its storage profile, which you'll remember from one of our previous videos. You can either set up ahead of time under Settings, you can click New Storage Profile from the drop-down, and those 2 options are if you're bringing your own storage, or if you're using AvePoint provided storage, it's set to default storage and you can't make any changes. After the name and the storage profile, what's the schedule that you want? And also, what do you want for your retention policy? How long should it keep the backed up data? Now you'll note here, it seems to be grayed out. I can't make a change. That's because I'm demonstrating right now with a trial license. In the case of having an enterprise license, then you can set this by weeks, by months, or by years. So I'm going to fill this in. And of course, if you'd like, provide a description. Now you'll notice in the description I've typed in, I'm listing what's being protected. The tool will protect these things automatically. You'll notice that we did not have anywhere where we had to tell it specifically in AD what we were trying to protect. You're going to get backups for your users, for your groups, and for your enterprise apps. We'll talk more about that, especially the enterprise apps, in our Restore video. If that all looks good, I click Next. I get a final review of what my scope is going to look like, and I save. You can see here, successfully updated the backup scope, and it will take effect in the next backup job. If I want to review any of the information about this, I can come in here and click the View button. If I need to edit anything, we have an Edit button, which puts us right back into the wizard. And for whatever reason, if I wanted to remove that backup scope, we have a Delete button. If I now go back to our Home tab, we can see that we are protected, and we're going to have our backups running to protect Azure AD. Now, for VMs and Azure Storage, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to switch over to another tenant here that I have that's pre-configured, so we can review what this looks like. So over here, we can see I've got all 3 of my scopes configured. So let's take a look. If I go into Azure Virtual Machine and click the gear, here we've got one already set up. And if we click our Edit button, we can see what that wizard again would look like if I was configuring this for the first time. Now you'll notice the wizard along the top has an extra step, configure storage based on region. We'll get there in a moment. But the first thing to note is how you select what's going to be backed up. When we were doing the backup scope for Azure AD, all I had to do was pick the AOS app that was talking to my Microsoft 365 tenant. But remember, you can have multiple VMs. So instead, what's going to happen here is it's going to use the delegated app that we also configure at the AOS level. Remember, we talked all about that in a previous video. And thanks to that delegated app, it's going to show me all of the different VMs that I can back up. Now, in this particular case, we only have the one, so that would have been the only thing to select. But you can have the different VMs, and you can potentially even have them in different regions. If you have a lot of VMs to filter through, well, you've got some filter drop-downs here up at the top that can make finding what you're looking for much easier. So, we were starting this from scratch. I would select that VM, I would click Next, and here's where we get to the extra step that we did not have for setting up the Azure AD scope. Again, you can see here it's showing me the region, and then out here to the right, it's showing me a storage profile. Now, again, remember, in a previous video, we talked all about how you can pre-create various storage profiles, including across different Microsoft data centers in different regions. So if you were backing up multiple VMs in different regions, you would see each VM in its region, and you would be able to pick a storage profile that matches. That's the logic. If you are using AvePoint default storage, though, we've seen now a few times where the default storage is just previously selected. If I click Next, step 3, very similar to what we saw for setting up the Azure AD scope. Give it a name. Generate an index for file level data export. This is an extra setting. If you want to export at the file level, you need an index for it to be able to see where that thing is and find it quickly. You can have it generate that. Of course, that will potentially slow down your backup jobs. Generating indexes always does. What kind of schedule would you like? You can see here, we've got a little bit more flexibility with the schedule. For Azure AD, we could really just do it once a day, and what time of the day was the backup. Here I can go by hour, by day, by week, by month, and then I've got some choices in the dropdown. So if you go by hour, every 6, essentially that's as aggressive as you can be, and you're getting 4 backups a day if you do that. So what is your backup requirement? Here's an example of configuring the retention policy to match what you want. As I mentioned previously, this is available with an enterprise license as opposed to a trial license. So here it's asking us, 1, how many snapshots do we want to keep? Snapshots, of course, are stored in Microsoft 365 for really, really fast restoration of your VMs and their content. But you're also creating backup data, which is being stored in the storage profile. How long do you want to keep the backup data versus keeping the snapshots in M365? If we click Next, that would take us to the final step of the configuration for the wizard. Just like with Azure AD scope, I can do a quick review. Did I set everything the way that I wanted? So a few more choices here. With Azure AD scope, all you're really doing is telling it which M365 tenant. Also, there's fewer choices to make for the actual backup settings themselves. With the VM scope, you have to tell it which VM. If you're backing up across multiple regions, you get to select different storage profiles by those regions, unless you're using AvePoint provided storage. And you have a couple of additional choices in the actual settings themselves, including how often the backup runs, how many snapshots you retain, and how long you keep the actual written backup data, which is going into your storage profile. The last one that we can set up is our Azure storage. So again, I can come in here and configure my backup scopes. I could do brand new if I wanted to, and here's where you have your difference between blob storage and file share storage. And I can take a look at any of these by clicking the edit button once again. Here we can see the wizard looks very similar to the VM wizard. So I'm going to select my tenant. Once again, I've got some filters if that makes finding the storage that I'm looking to back up a little bit easier. And then down below that, I can see what is going to be backed up as part of what subscription. It even lists for me things like the resource group and the subscription that it's part of. Here, once again, very similar to VMs, being able to pick, if I've configured it, different storage profiles by region. Scope name, scope filter, if you would like to prevent certain content from being part of the backup. The schedule is similar, but we can't do by hours. You can see days, weeks, months, and years. And retention policy, we're writing backup data, not keeping VM snapshots. So that option is not contained here. So if you are looking to protect Azure AD, which includes users, groups, and enterprise apps, if you are looking to back up your VMs, even across multiple regions, if you are looking to back up your storage, which includes Azure Blob Storage and file shares, on the Home tab, click each of the gears, walk through the wizards, keeping in mind, one more time, that all of your apps in AOS must be configured properly. Keeping in mind, if you're going to do virtual machines and Azure storage, that you also have to do a delegated app. Go into Azure portal, into your subscriptions, and make sure you give that app contribute. Otherwise, what will happen is when you come over here, you won't be able to pick your VMs. You won't be able to pick your storage. You simply won't see them, right? So prerequisites. And then also make sure, if necessary, you configure your storage profiles. Once you've got that stuff done, it's just making choices in here and allowing your backups to run. Thanks for watching this short video on configuring backup scopes in AvePoint Cloud Backup for Azure.